Okay, now that we have some data in our MongoDB database, let's take a look at retrieving that data via a controller. So inside our search service, we're going to create a new file. Again, this is going to be a class, and we're just going to call this one search controller. And inside here, because this is going to be a web API controller, we need to derive from controller base. And I think I'm going to have to give VS Code a kick. That MongoDB extension, I think it does cause a bit of havoc with the C# extension. So I'm just going to reload the window again so that I start to see the errors inside VS Code. The C# dev kit that I'm using, it is in preview, so I'm not expecting perfection from this. So my expectations are quite low. And I'm accepting of the fact that sometimes I'll probably need to do this whilst using an extension that's in preview, such as the one I am demonstrating here. So we need to derive from controller base, just like in the auction controller. We're going to use the API controller attribute, and we're going to give this a root. And this one's going to be API/search. And inside this particular controller, we don't need to provide a constructor. We don't need to inject the MongoDB entities that we're using. We can simply just use it because it's a static class. So I'm going to start off by creating the HTTP gets, and here I'm going to say public async task. That's going to return an action result. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm using action result, because we can quite happily use iAction result, and this will give us the HTTP responses. The only thing with iAction result is it doesn't take a type parameter. So I'm not able to do something like this, or at least it never used to. It's not giving me an error, but I don't completely trust VS Code at this moment in time. But typically, if we want to return the type of thing that we're returning, instead of just returning OK and then a response, then we can specify that inside an action result. It's just something I typically use. You've got an option. You can return an action result with no type. You can return an iAction result, and that will give you access to HTTP responses. Or you can do it this way, which is what I'm doing, and it gives you a tiny bit of type safety when it comes to what you're returning from the controller. So I'm going to call this method search items, and it's going to take a string of the search term. So what are we going to do here? Well, first of all, let's go and take a look at the documentation for MongoDB entities and what this gives us and what we can do with it. The documentation's fairly small, certainly in comparison to Entity Framework documentation, but this gives us an indication of the things that we can do with our entities. We can save, update, and delete, and we've got examples of how to use this in various different ways of saving our entities, what we can do when we want to update, and what we can do when we delete them. Even though MongoDB is not a relational database, using this particular package does allow us to treat it a little bit like as though it was a relational database. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to have single documents inside our MongoDB and just query them directly. But there is an option using this particular package if you wanted to do so. And when it comes to queries, we've got a bunch of options. We can use find queries, we've got link queries, and this allows us to write the queries in this kind of syntax. If we use find, then we can use code that's relatively similar to what we would use in Entity Framework in terms of the type of things we could do here. And we've got the option for paged search as well, which we'll be taking a look at soon. But for now, we're going to keep things straightforward as possible, and we'll just use the find queries, and we can find one, we can find many. And first of all, we're just going to use the find, which is going to return a full list of our items without a search term. And that's what we'll do first of all. And then we'll add the ability for us to search our MongoDB database. So let's implement that functionality first of all. So I'm going to say var query equals, and I'm going to say db.find, and I want to find items. So I'm going to say item. And we can specify sorting inside here as well. So I'm going to say query.sort, and I'm going to use the same as I did in the auction database. I'm going to sort by the name of the make and say x.ascending in this case, and then say a goes to a.make. So that's going to sort our items in order of make, and then we can say var result equals await, and we can say query, and we can execute async on this particular query, and then we can return the result. And does it recognize that this is going to be a type of item? In fact, this needs to be a list of item. And then there we go. Now we get the type safety because it's expecting a list of items, and sure, that's what we get from our particular query, a list of items. So now we can go test this in Postman. Let's just open up the terminal, make sure that that warning, if it's there, then we say yes, we want to restart our app. We've added a new controller. That's something that is not supported by Hot Reload. And let's go to Postman and see if our new query is going to work. So I'll just close this stuff down. And we'll go into section 3. And first of all, we'll get all items, which means we're not providing a search parameter. And if I click send, then what we get is the list of auctions, just as we did in our auction service, but this time we're going to our search API, localhost 7002 API search, and it's giving us our list of auctions in alphabetical order by the make. So once again, we've got the Audi R8 as the first item there. Let's go back to our controller, and we'll just add in the search functionality as well. So we'll check to see if the string is provided. So we're going to check for the existence of this search term. And we'll use !string dot is null or empty for the search term. And if we do have the string, then we're going to say query dot match. And we're going to specify search dot full, as in a full text search, for the search term. And we've got some additional search functionality here. We can also sort by text score, and that's not going to make a huge deal of difference in an application of our size with the search functionality we've provided, but since it's here, I'm going to use it anyway. And effectively it sorts the results of a text search by the meta text score. So each result is given a score, and it's going to sort them by that. But I promise you it's not going to make a world of difference in what we're doing here, in the simplicity of our application. We're not trying to replicate Google in this particular service. But let's go and check to see if this functionality works. Once again, I'm just going to check the console, make sure that I see Hot Reload has succeeded, as I still don't trust it to work 100%. And this time we've got a search parameter, or the search query string for the search term, and I'm just going to look for cars with the value of Ford. And if I click search, then what we should find is that we get the make of Ford, and Ford, and Ford. So 3 Ford cars in our list, and we should be able to search by the color as well. And in fact, we should be able to search by the make and the color. So I've got a black Ford there, a rust Ford there, and a white. So if I say Ford black, then we should get a single result back. And in fact, because of the way the search works, I get the Ford cars back and I get the black cars back as well. So technically that search met both of these particular results. And we should be able to check for individual cars. If I just search for Mustang and click send, then this time we get the Ford Mustang. So the search functionality is working such as it is. And don't worry about these test results failing at the moment either, because we haven't got to the endpoint of what we're doing with our search controller yet. But imagine we had a gazillion items in our auction service. We, of course, would not want them to be able to do something like this and get all gazillion auctions back from our database. We'd much prefer to page those results. So what we'll take a look at next is paging. Okay, so we're thinking ahead to a time where our auction site is immensely successful and we do have gazillions of items in our database, which means we don't want to send all gazillion back if somebody makes a query just to our search service, we'd like to paginate those results just to make sure that if they do want to see 1,000,000 results, we're going to make them click through every page until they get to the end. So we're going to return less results, and effectively we're just talking about pagination here. So let's go back and take a look at what we need to do for this. And because we're using this MongoDB entities package, this is actually really simple. And we don't need to do a lot of work to implement this functionality. So I'm going to add another couple of parameters to the arguments for the search items. I'm going to have an int for the page number and give this an initial value of 1. And I'm also going to add an int for the page size. And just for the sake of it, I'm going to give it an initial value of 4. And let's move these down so that I can fit them on the same window. So in order to use pagination, we need to change our type of query. Instead of find, we're going to do a page search for the item. And once we specify that, our query is now changed into a page search, and we can make use of pagination parameters. So the query, I'm going to say query.pageNumber is going to be the page number, and query.pageSize is going to be the page size. And I'm going to return, not the result this time, I'm going to return OK. And I'm going to specify new, and we're just going to return an anonymous object, and I'm going to specify results is equal to result.results, and the page count is equal to results.pageCounts, and the total count is equal to results.total counts. And that is how we implement pagination using MongoDB entities. It's super simple. So let's go and test that this has actually worked. Once again, just check the console, make sure it has restarted and is not asking me to restart. And this time, if we get all items without any parameters, we're going to use the defaults that we've set. So we'd expect to see page number 1 and 4 results with a total count of 10. And that's what we're expecting. So let's give that a go. And I've seen this a few times in testing actually, and it's just hot reload, not hot reloading. And in order to get around this particular problem, specifically where it's saying that it matches multiple routes, well, it doesn't. I've only got one endpoint in my search controller, so that cannot possibly be the case. But all that's happened here is the hot reloading has got itself into a bit of a pickle, and we actually need to stop and just restart our API. I've never had much success with this hot reload. I'm using it anyway because I continue to hope that one day it will work for API requests in a controller, but today is not that day. And we just need to, if we do encounter an error, just make sure your first troubleshooting step is to go ahead and restart the service that is giving you the problem. So let's click send again, and this time we do get the response back. Also, all of the tests are passing now because we've got a results object that contains our array of auctions, and there should be 4 of them because that's the number we asked for. We've got a page count of 3 and a total count of 10. That's exactly what we're looking for. And we're going to get pagination, of course, if we search, even though we've only got, well, let's take out Mustang and put Ford back in. And if I click send, then again, we get the results, but we get paginated results, and we've got a page count of 1 with a total count of 3. And if we go to these other requests, this is the same with no parameters. We've already looked at that. But if we want to check or change the page size, we can override the defaults. And if we were searching for page number 2 and page size is 2 and click send, then we'll find if we take a look at the page count, this is now 5 with a total count of 10. And if we change the value of the page number, then we should expect to see different results. And the first car here is a BMW. If I click send, then the first car is Audi R8. So we now have pagination implemented with just a couple of code changes, really straightforward to do. But we're also going to use our search service to get filtered results as well. So we're going to extend our query string effectively so that it covers more than just search. It's also going to be responsible for filtering and ordering of results as well. And we'll take a look at that next.